Take my heart, wash my soul, renew my mind and make me whole. Take my heart.
Joshua 9, deceivers may come to your camp. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Joshua and the boys. So let's read it. I'm actually not going to do a whole lot of in-text like inductive studies today because it's I'm basically pulling out three themes, and I'm going to talk about the three themes that we see here. But so when I read this, and we're going to read the whole chapter, think very hard of what's being said. I want you guys to get the context. It's a simple story. It's a simple, straightforward story. It's actually a very interesting story in my opinion. So I hope you guys enjoy reading it. But I'm just going to read it. And so remember as much as you can, because I'm going to draw out three themes or three subjects from this. Verse 1 of chapter 9. Now all the kings west of the Jordan River heard about what happened. These were the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and the Jebusites, who lived in the hill country in the western foothills and along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far north as the Lebanon mountains. These kings combined their armies to fight out as one against Joshua and the Israelites. Smart strategy, pulled together to try to defeat the Israelites. But there's another strategy, verse 3. But when the people of Gibeon, who are also, I believe, Hivites as well, but they're in the region, the town of Gibeon, so we can call them Gibeonites, heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to deception. There's one of the themes, deception, to save themselves. They sent ambassadors to Joshua, loading their donkeys with weathered saddlebags and old patched wineskins. They put on worn-out patched sandals and ragged clothes, and the bread they took with them was dry and moldy. When they arrived at the camp of Israel at Gilgal, they told Joshua and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant land to ask you to make a peace treaty with us." The Israelites replied to these Hivites, the other Hivites, "How do we know you don't live nearby? For if we do, we cannot make a treaty with you." Okay, you guys know the implications behind that. They're meant to go and take the land of Canaan, the promised land. So are they being tricked? Well, let's see how they investigate it. Verse 8. They replied, No, we're your servants." "But who are you?" Joshua demanded. "Where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country. We have heard of the might of the Lord your God, all he did in Egypt. We have heard what he did to the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all our people instructed us, take supplies for a long journey. Go meet with the people of Israel and tell them, we are your servants. Please make a treaty with us." The bread was hot, it was hot from the ovens when we left our homes. But now, as you can see, it is dry and moldy. They wouldn't be lying, would they? Verse 13, "These wineskins were new when we filled them, but now they're old and split open. And our clothing and sandals are worn out from a very long journey." Well, we know they're lying to them. But let's see how they investigated in verse 14. "So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord." That's another theme we're going to look at today. "Then Joshua made a peace treaty with them and guaranteed their safety. And the leaders of the community ratified their agreement with a binding oath." 3 days after making the treaty, they learned that these people were actually lived nearby. The Israelites set out at once to investigate and reached their towns in 3 days. The name of these towns were Gibeon, Kerpheth or Kerpherath, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack the towns, for the Israelite leaders had made a vow to them in the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. So now they're honoring their vow that they made with them, which is another theme we're going to look at, the third theme. The people of Israel grumbled against the leaders because of the treaty. But the leaders replied, "Since we have sworn an oath in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel, we cannot touch them. This is what we must do. We must let them live. For divine anger would come upon us if we broke our oath. Let them live. so they made them woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community, as the Israelite leaders directed. Joshua called together the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you lie to us? Why did you say that you lived in a distant land when you live right here among us? May you be cursed. From now on, you will always be servants who cut wood and carry water for the house of the Lord." Well, I think the question why is because they didn't want to die, and that's why they lied. But is it justified? Who knows? Well, someone might know. They replied in verse 24, "We did it because we, your servants, were clearly told that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you this entire land to destroy all the living people on it, of people living in it. So we fear greatly for our lives because of you. That is why we have done this. Now we are at your mercy. Do to us whatever you think is right." So Joshua did not allow the people of Israel to kill them. But that day he made the Gibeonites the woodcutters and water carriers for the community of Israel and for the altar of the Lord, wherever the Lord would choose to build it. And that is what they do to this day, or at least the day of this writing here. So the first thing, like I said, there's three things. The first thing is the concept of deception, being deceived. And so I called this little slide "Wolves in Rags," because again, these guys came to deceive, but they came dressed. They were performing. They're acting it. Long distance. But they didn't. And the thing is, you could easily figure out, okay, well, that's just moldy bread that they grabbed, and that's just some old wineskins that they grabbed. And are they playing it? Are they acting it? Are they deceiving it? And the thing is, it took them 3 days to figure that out. It took them 3 days to figure out they were being deceived. But yet they did something as profound, as important as signing a peace treaty, with just going off of real flimsy evidence. They're being deceived. And there are deceivers, believe it or not, that still exist today. And so verse 3, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and they resorted to deception to save themselves. So just some thoughts before we look at some other verses in the Bible. Has fear and distrust. Again, these are some themes that I think come up a lot in Joshua, especially the concept of fear. We've talked about fear and anxiety quite a lot. Of course, the solution to that is knowing that God's with you and trusting God's with you, and He's got the ability to save you, to strengthen you, to be there with you. But sometimes with fear comes in, and with that, a lot of times it's a result of distrust. Again, we talked about how if we know God's perfect love, then there's no fear. But if we have fear, we need to ask, do we really know God's perfect love? So again, distrust is almost a contrast. There's that word again, contrast. It's the absence of God's perfect love. If you know God's love, then you trust Him. If you don't know God's perfect love, then you may not trust Him. You don't really know God. And so there's nothing to trust because you don't have that knowledge, experiential knowledge of who God is. Does that make sense? So again, fear and distrust in the Lord can make you succumb to deception, to low arts, low techniques, manipulation, lying as a personality trait to deal with life. So beware. This is not the good life. You do not want to practice a life of lies and deception. It's just not the good life. We're going to look at verses to support this. Even though it's the way of the world. This is how the world normally works and functions. If you know anyone, if you have neighbors, you'll know, and you talk to your neighbors, you'll know that lying and manipulation is a big part of how people get by in life. That's the norm. So we're the freaks for trying to live a life of integrity. But as Christians, we believe that we want that God exists, and the good life is pursuing Him morally, with our lives, our minds, our whole totality of our lives and minds, following Him, trusting in Him that by doing right, avoiding sin, avoiding evil, we can have a good life. That's what Christians believe. But the world doesn't know God, doesn't know Christ. They think the good life is achieved by manipulation, deceit, and lying. That's how you want a good life, and you lie to the council to get your money. That's how the world thinks. That's common. And there's other things, lying your taxes, lying to your boss, so on and so forth. So if you believe that you are a Christian, then your life should exemplify total trust in God. So what is deception? What's that all about? Proverbs says a lot of things that we say today. I had to cut all my Proverbs out because the Proverbs is just loaded with some beautiful wisdom. But here's a couple good ones. Proverbs 10:9 says, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely. But he who makes his ways crooked will be found out." Again, I always go back to our dealings with young people and teenagers specifically. They lie, and it's obvious. I mean, it's like when you lie, you can see right through it. Who do you think you're fooling? You're going to be found out. The way of lying and the practice of lying, even though it's a way of covering up your tracks, that's what lies are. Lies are birthed by lies because it's the attempt to cover up your tracks. But eventually, you're going to be found out. You're going to be seen because someone's going to walk up and say, "Wait, you said this, but it's this. That's a contradiction. What's up?" "I don't know." "I think I kind of do know. Someone's been lying." That's what Proverbs talks about. You're going to be. So it's better to have integrity. Integrity means walking in sincerity, when your beliefs matches your actions and your words. That's what words, lying, as well as your actions, what you do. It lines up. It coincides with your beliefs, what you actually believe is real and right. So you can do things that are silly, but if you believe that these silly things are true, at least you're not lying. At least you're walking with integrity. But then, of course, someone might come and say, "Well, listen, by the way, you're making a mistake. Let me explain to you how." So then if you're convinced, you have to change your ways. Does that make sense? That's what integrity is all about. Proverbs 12:22. "Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord." That's heavy duty. That is heavy duty. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. Do you want to be God's delight? I mean, many people, again, in the world, the way that they try to get by and try to succeed, there's no interest in having a relationship with God. But for those who want to have a relationship with God, they don't want to lie because that's an abomination to the Lord. You know what I'm saying? We're interested in being faithful and in being a delight to God. Romans 12:2, "Do not be conformed to this world." Again, we are different if we say we're Christians, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern. And a big part of the renewing is being able to earn or to gain this ability to discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. So we know God and we know what's right and we know what's wrong. So discerning, knowing what is deception, what's not. And so again, those who walk with God can see that this is right or wrong for two reasons. One, to protect themselves from others, but also to keep ourselves from being liars and deceivers ourselves. "Well, I don't know if I should do this or not." Well, why don't you ask God what he thinks about the matter, and he'll tell you whether or not you should do it or not. You know what I'm saying? So discerning is knowing what you should or shouldn't do, but it's also knowing how to protect yourself from others who are deceiving or are trying to deceive you. Yeah, I agree with you, pal. James 1:22, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourself." So again, make sure that your beliefs and your actions and your deeds line up. That's integrity. And if you don't have that, you could very likely deceive yourself, and that's not good. John 8:44, "You are of your father the devil." This is a heavy-duty verse. This is Jesus rebuking the Pharisees for their lying practices and lying behavior. The way they function and operate is a system of lies and deception. And he says that comes from the devil, not from God. So again, you are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. Again, as Christians, we talk about doing the desires of God, following the will of God. But if we're practicing a way of lies, we're not doing that. We're adversely doing the will of Satan, who loves lies. He's the father of lies. There's no truth in Satan. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character. That's it. God's character is good. It's filled with integrity. It's filled with goodness and morality. But Satan's is filled with lies and evil and falseness. Lies, as we see here in John 8:48. It's a part of his character. It's who he is. He's a liar and the father of lies. Proverbs 11:3. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. Another proverb, of course. Luke 6:31. This is the golden rule. You guys know the golden rule, right? Even the world loves the golden rule. Counselors love it. Psychologists love it. Philosophers love it. Everyone, moral theorists love the golden rule. It's great. Do to others as you want them to do to you. Or as it says here, as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. Again, what do you think is right? How do you want to be treated? That's how you treat another person. Integrity. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self, his practices. I think we get that. The second subject I want to talk about today is this. Oh, no, you didn't. What didn't they do? They didn't consult the Lord. Okay, you might think, oh, no, you didn't check the bread. Oh, no, you didn't do it right. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't consult the Lord. That's the biggest mistake, in my opinion. They made a quick decision. How many times do we make a quick decision when excited about something and then it ends up biting us in the backside? How often does that happen? Probably a lot, especially when you're younger. It's more of a young person thing, I must say. Again, I always pick on the young people. But old people can do that as well if they don't correct themselves. It's part of maturity. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So how I did it right. Gosh, I thought I was going to do a George Bush there. I did it right, though. Cool. Okay, but anyways, you guys get what I'm saying here, though, right? Let's take time. Especially with big, important decisions. Take your time. Especially with big, important decisions. Consult the Lord. Are you in the middle of making a major life decision? And I just threw out a couple examples. What church involvement, how you're going to get involved with church, what you're going to commit to throughout the week. I mean, these things are decisions that are affecting your life. They could take up your whole year, or even years if it's something that you grow and develop with. Moving your home, schooling, choices, subjects, career, marriage. Who are you going to marry? In my opinion, that's a lifelong decision and shouldn't be quickly made. Family. You have one shot to build a family. Do it right. So on and so forth. Have you consulted the Lord with these things, or do they just happen? I think for a lot of people, even in the church, it just happens. We'll just do this because it's here, whatever. I just happen to be here, so oh well. There's no thought. And on top of that, there's no talking to God about it. So how do we talk to God? You know where I'm going with this one, don't you? Oh, I have to finish the last line. Or are you just looking at the bread? Again, just the obvious things. I just happen to be here. And the bread looks moldy, so it must be true. Stop and consult the Lord. Spend some time talking to God and listening to God. And yes, consulting the Lord does mean you must pray. Okay? And I bet with big, bold letters. Because as a Christian, you must pray. I've actually met a minister, so-called minister of the gospel, who told me, and I'm not joking, it's not my ministry to pray. It's my wife's. So you are preaching the gospel, you're sharing God's word, and you're hearing from him so you could, grow your church. You have visions. Where are these visions coming from? But you don't actually spend time talking to God? That to me is just probably the most insane thing in the world. Don't call yourself a minister if you don't pray. And if you're a Christian, you must reconcile the fact that you got to pray. If you don't have a practice of a life of praying and spending time with God in this way, then you're missing out on a lot. You just got to take my word for it if you don't. But let's look at some things here. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Again, if you don't spend time with God and praying, all you're doing is leaning on your own understanding. You're looking at the moldy bread and thinking, it looks like moldy bread to me. In all your ways acknowledge, which means to seek, to know. That's interesting. How to put that in there because it's kind of funny. Learn to know, to perceive and see, to find out and discern. Again, that word discern. How do we discern? We learned that earlier. How do we discern? There it is. Do not be conformed to the world, but transforming your mind. So your mind's being transformed. That's a part of the process of being with God. And it's almost like being discipled. It's like sitting at God's feet and taking notes and learning from him. When you spend time with God in prayer, your mind literally changes. And you're able to discern. Okay. To discern. To discriminate. To experience. A big part of, we talk about experiencing God. How do you experience God? Do you experience God just with positive feelings? Or do you experience God by actually praying and spending time with him in a real, organic way? By organic, I mean spiritually organic. To recognize, to consider him. And he'll make your path straight. I.e., he'll give you clear direction for your life. in decisions like where you should live, what kind of family are you going to have, who are you going to marry, what you're going to study in school, your subjects, all these things, so on and so forth. What church to go to, how to get involved. James 1:5. If any of you lack wisdom, so you're, this is too much. I just like life to happen to me. I don't want to own my decisions. I want to just deal with what's fallen on my lap. I can't make up my mind. I can't decide. I lack wisdom. Do you feel that way? I know we all feel that way from time to time. In fact, that's a big thing I'm dealing with my son right now. He hates making decisions, even about the most menial thing, because he's afraid of making the wrong decision. And it's crazy how even at a young age we are torture ourselves by this, experiencing lack of wisdom. What do? You ask God. If you don't pray, you can't ask God. And if you lack wisdom, you're just going to stay there in that state of lacking wisdom. Got to ask God. And he gives generously to all without reproach. And it will be given. It will be given him. Philippians 4:6-7 says, do not be anxious. Again, this theme again. Do you feel anxious? Well, again, maybe it's because you don't have the wisdom that comes from God. And if you don't have the wisdom that comes from God, you don't know, then you have fear making decisions. If fear making decisions, you're going to be anxious because, again, what if I go the wrong way and do the wrong thing and mess up and then I get hurt and my family gets hurt and I'm left without? I'm anxious now. Don't be anxious about anything. How are we going to be free from anxiety? But in everything by, prayer. Come on, Scott, you're boring me. Can we just stop talking about praying? I hate praying. Praying sucks because it takes up, 5 minutes of my whole day. It's horrible. And then sometimes if I really get in the mode of praying, I might pray for 10 minutes in a whole day. You know how long that is, 10 minutes in a whole day? That's so long. I can't do that. I got to play my games and I got to go to work and I got to eat because my tummy needs lots of food. 10 minutes of praying is just unreasonable. Okay, that's fine, but then deal with your anxiety. Okay, so what? Pray, supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God. Oh man. Is 10 minutes worth having some peace that comes from God? Is that 10 minutes of praying? If God just wants to give you some peace, maybe you don't want peace, so don't pray. You don't want peace and don't pray, that's cool. Which surpasses all understanding and will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Isaiah 30:21, and your ears shall hear a word behind you. I love this. Again, I am reading a little bit into this. But just again, this concept of communicating with God, it's so beautiful. It's so wonderful when we are in the fleshly ways, make quick decisions that can lead us into making bad decisions that can hurt us and harm us, which is warrants the fear of anxiety and stuff like that and harm, because we can make bad decisions. But the cool thing is, if we talk to God, we can trust, we can hear from God. And that's why I like Isaiah 30:20. It says that your ears will hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. And again, I can't help but think about when, was it Samuel? I heard the still quiet voice of the Lord that night. And it was quiet, and he literally, you guys realize that we believe as Christians that this story really happened. That God really, literally spoke to Samuel. You guys know that. It's not just a fairy tale. We believe God spoke to Samuel. And he used a still, quiet voice. So Samuel had to shut up and sit still for a little bit and just be with God to hear it. I will hear his voice. And he'll say, what? This is how you make decisions for your life. This way, walk in it. So again, integrity. And the thing is, this is interesting because with this, even though these guys, the Gibeonites, practice lies and deception, isn't it funny to see how Joshua, they made a promise and they kept the word? They could have easily said, but we don't have to keep our word because you lied to us. Right? Look, they kept the word. And this too is integrity, keeping your promise. Another thing, this world, if someone says, I swear to you, I promise, you might as well just assume they're saying, I'm going to lie to you, but I'm covering it with a whole lot of yada-da. Right? Oh, I promise, I'll follow through. You can trust in me, especially if they're tradesmen. Oh, I don't want to pick on tradesmen today. But usually it means you can't count on me. Don't count on me. Just hope I show up and do the job. That's usually what I promise means in the world today. But the leaders replied, since we have sworn an oath in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel, we cannot touch them. When you make a promise to people, they count on it. And when you follow through, it hurts. This is what we must do. I love this, integrity. We gotta do it. We made a promise to people before the Lord. Even though they lied, and we could said, breach a contract, they didn't. They kept their word. We must live. We must let them live. For divine anger would come upon us if we broke our oath. And that's the interesting thing. They didn't lie. They didn't keep their promises in a isolated vacuum of an environment. It was informed by other bits of information, i.e. God exists. And if you do something before God and you make a promise before God, then we don't want to break God's heart. So by breaking these oaths, not only hurting these people, because again, if we say, well, who cares if we hurt them? Because they hurt us. That right there would justify it. But they said, but because we promised before the Lord, and we believe the Lord exists, we believe he hears it, and we believe that actually if we disappoint the Lord in this, we might actually be judged by it. That's why we stick to our word, because we make promises, God hears it, and God's checking our hearts and our character. Again, integrity. And here's a little diagram of what integrity might look like. When our beliefs and our actions coincide, we have integrity. C.S. Lewis said this, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's watching. Again, I would add to this, it's because someone is always watching, and that's God. And we're walking with God, we're living with God, we're consulting God, we want to do what's right before God because that's the good life, and we want to have that good life. That is a life that God has designed and engineered for us. And a big part of that is not practicing lies and deceit. And by keeping our promises, it's called integrity. Doing what you know is right. I'm going to blow through these ones. Because there's so much. But I'm going to blow through them. Doing what is right, or doing what you know is right. Proverbs 28:6, better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways. Proverbs 11:3, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. Now, do you believe these proverbs? Do you believe these are really wise bits of information that can help us in our lives? Because I think they are. And I think what they're saying here is very important. Those who practice treacherous ways will be destroyed. It's not the good life. The life of integrity is. 1 Peter 3:16, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. Again, how you behave. Behaving with integrity. Not deceit, not lies. And with that, having the benefit of a good conscience, confidence. Proverbs 27, the righteous who walks in his integrity. Blessed, oh wow, if you're a daddy or you're a mommy, look at this one. Take this to heart. The righteous who walk in his integrity. Blessed are his children after him. And boy, oh boy, we know this is the truth. Proverbs 12:22. Lying lips are an abomination, Lord. We already saw that one, so let's keep going. Luke 6:10. One who is faithful and very little. Oh, I love this one. That's when you always hear the ministry talks. But think about this. One who is faithful and very little is also faithful in much. It talks about a character of heart. This is why we talk about ministries. We want the ministers to be people of good character. But this is when I read this, what I see is a person with good character. A person with good character, with integrity, is that way in every circumstance, in every situation. Even if it's a small thing or if it's a big thing, they're always going to have this personality of integrity or faithfulness. As a contrast to one who is dishonest, and very little is also so much. So again, it doesn't matter how little or how big, how important or how insignificant the situation is, a person who walks in integrity is always going to show up practicing integrity. But a person who's dishonest. So again, he might be dishonest because he's trying to cut corners to climb the ladder. But once he becomes the boss, he'll be a good guy. False. So in leadership decisions, if you see the guy who's super ambitious, at the detriment of others, be careful, because he might be that way when he's the chief. But a person who's got a good heart, from the get-go. That's the person you want to keep an eye on. Colossians 3:23. Do whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for the men. Proverbs 21:3. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. 2 Corinthians 8:21. For we aim at what is honorable, not only in the Lord's sight, but also in the sight of men. That's us guys today. Aiming sharply and promptly, which is nice for a change. Application. Deception. Beware. It can affect you in many ways. Both if we're not careful from the outside, but also it's the way we practice. It can affect us from the inside. There are those who will seek to deceive you. That's just a harsh reality. In this world we live in, that's going to happen. And they're going to do it for their own personal gain. And it comes in many ways and shapes and sizes. It could be for money, it could be for power, it could be for popularity, it could be for attention. It could be for all kinds of reasons why. So, is a common technique practiced in the world today. Many will seek to justify their deceptive ways. Again, the Gideonites could have said that they had to. They had no choice. They had to practice this deception. They had to deceive the Israelites because in doing so, they saved their own lives. So again, a lot of people you're going to find in your community, in your society, in your lives, they're going to do certain things like maybe cheat on the taxes or whatever, and they say, "Oh, we have to because if I don't, we'll go without." And like, okay, is it right? What does it matter if it's right? It's right to me. Again, justifying in their own eyes. Classic subjectivism. The way of the Christian is to trust in the Lord, however. So we don't do things like cheat our taxes and whatnot, and rip off our bosses and rip off our clients and things like that, because our trust isn't in our deceptive techniques. Our trust is in the Lord, that He will provide what we need. Like that song, God gives us just what we need, Do not fear. Again, this is a recurring theme. Do not fear. God is with you. But please consider consulting Him. And this will require that you pray. Remember, it is better to be poor with integrity. I think this is one of the verses that really got me. Because it's like, hey, be poor. It's way better to be poor. And I think sometimes I watch stupid YouTube videos about what happened to the celebrities in the 80s and 90s. And sometimes they end up on the streets because their wealth that they acquired was wasted because of foolishness. They had no integrity. They were fools. And so if you're poor and you're able to get by and enjoy your life and loving God, loving your family, that's great. Because it's not about money. Because money can come and go. So again, it's better to be poor with integrity. Avoiding deceptive behavior. Things that aren't true and they're not true. Then to be rich, powerful, popular, important, and so on and so forth. Whatever. With no integrity. Practicing, again, deceptive behavior. Contrasts. Doing and saying things that you shouldn't. So that's an application. Quite a lot of things that we dealt with today.
Oh, my great and mighty God, Jesus. Oh, my great and mighty God, Jesus. I want to be made anew and worship you, my great